Hey, Rain, before you run away, I got a order for a wreath on your sheet in the office, just FYI. The money's in your mailbox. All right. We on the internets? We are on the internets. Fantastic. How are we doing, everybody? Morning. Evening. I know it's not. It's morning somewhere, right? We live on a rapidly spinning ball. Okay. Well, welcome to confirmation on this fine, fantastic evening.
It's not fine. It's freezing.
It is freezing, but it's also fine and fantastic. It can be both, Bree. I don't know if I'd go so far as to say t-shirt weather, but it's not terrible. So, as we gather, welcome to confirmation. Welcome also to those of you joining us online, either now or in the future as this is recorded. Good to see you all. And as we jump into this, it's been a couple weeks since we actually had a lesson because last week was Fun Week, and that was kind of fun because it was fun week. But who could remember way back in the olden days, 2 weeks ago, what we learned about? Does anybody remember who we were talking about last time we got together? It was a long time ago. Bree?
Wasn't it Noah and the Ark?
That's even further back. Noah and the Ark is like 2 lessons ago, I think. Last time, what was that? Abraham, yes, Abraham and Sarah. Okay, so who in the world were Abraham and Sarah? People. They were people. What happened with these particular people? Who remembers what happened with Sarah and Abraham? Back here. Yeah, God promised them a baby, and God gave them a baby when they were like 1,000,000 years old, is what I heard. They were about 100 or so years old, but it was a really long time, right? They had to wait a really long time. And before God promised them that they were going to have a baby, do you remember what else God asked them to do? Leave their town. Yeah, he asked them to leave everything that they knew and go somewhere that was totally different, where they didn't know anybody, where they didn't know anything. They probably didn't even speak the language. Kind of a leap of faith. And yet they still did it, right? Okay. So, at the end of the story of Sarah and Abraham, when God promises that they're going to have as many ancestors as there are stars in the sky, as many ancestors as there are grains of sand on the earth, all of these wonderful metaphors, they have a baby. Did you remember, or did I even say what the name of the baby was? Oh, yes, it's Isaac. Very good. Sarah and Abraham have a son, and his name is Isaac. Now, tonight, we're actually not going to talk too much about Isaac, though he is a part of the story. We're going to jump ahead a generation, and we're going to learn a little bit more about Sarah and Abraham's grandchildren, Isaac's sons. And their names are Jacob and Esau. Have you guys heard of Jacob and Esau before? Yes? No? Some of you have? Yes? Okay. Who remembers anything about Jacob and Esau? Bree, you remember something? Yes, Jacob does eventually grow up and has children of his own. That is true. Yep. Sorry? Very close, very close. It's actually the other one, Jacob, who ended up getting another name called Israel. But we'll get to that as well. Good. I'm glad that you picked up on that. I didn't say anything about that. That's awesome. They were, in fact, twins, Teresa. Yes, Jacob and Esau were twins. But I'm not going to talk to you guys all night about Jacob and Esau. Instead, I think we should hear a little bit about this on a video.
God's story, Jacob and Esau. So part of God's story is about twin brothers, and it begins like this. Once, there were twins named Jacob and Esau, and they didn't get along. They actually started fighting before they were born. Then during birth, Esau came out first, but Jacob was holding on to his heel. That's not normal, and they even look different. The Bible says Esau's body was covered in so much red hair, it was almost like he had clothes on. Jacob's skin was smooth. Well, they got even more different as they grew up. Esau hunted animals and spent time outside. Their dad, Isaac, was a big meat eater, so Esau was his favorite. Jacob, on the other hand, was a quiet guy who liked to stay indoors. Their mom, Rebekah, liked Jacob the best. The Bible doesn't talk much about Jacob and Esau as kids, but we do know Esau was lucky to be the oldest because he had what's called a birthright. That meant Esau would be in charge of their family, including all their money, land, and stuff. Jacob would probably have to work for his brother Esau, and their dad Isaac would give Esau a blessing, which means Isaac would ask God to take care of his oldest son Esau in an extra special way. Well, you probably think Esau was pretty excited about this, but he wasn't. In fact, one day he gave it up. He'd just returned from a hunting trip. Since he was out killing animals all day, he didn't have time to eat. He came home starving. Jacob was making stew, so Esau said, "Quick, give me some of that stew. I'm very hungry." Now, Jacob was a little sneaky, so he didn't just share the stew with his hungry brother, which would have been nice. Instead, he said, "First, sell me your birthright." And guess what? Esau said yes. It's a little like paying $1 million for a bowl of mushy soup. We don't know why Esau did that, but the Bible says he didn't care about the birthright. But later, when Isaac was really old and about to die, he wanted to ask God to take special care of his firstborn Esau. So he told Esau to go hunting and make him some tasty food, maybe for the last time. Now, Esau wanted the birthright, so he left right away to hunt. Meanwhile, Rebekah had heard Isaac and Esau talking, and remember, Jacob was her favorite. She wanted him to get the blessing, so she did something really sneaky. She told Jacob, "I will prepare tasty food for your father. You take it to your father to eat. Then he'll give you his blessing before he dies." See, Isaac was blind. She was telling Jacob to pretend he was Esau. But there was a slight problem with her plan. First off, Esau was hairy. So if Isaac touched Jacob's smooth skin, he would know the truth. The Bible says Esau had a certain smell too, which might be a polite way of saying he stunk. I mean, imagine how smelly a guy would be if he was always sweating and getting dead animal blood stuck on his clothes and matted in his hairy skin. And this was before deodorant. So even though Isaac was blind, he might smell Jacob or touch his smooth arm and know the truth. Well, Rebekah was sneaky like Jacob. She told Jacob to put sheepskin on his arms and wear some of Esau's smelly clothes. Now Isaac would never know. And even though Isaac wondered why the voice sounded like Jacob, guess what? The trick worked. Jacob got the blessing. Now Esau would have to work for him. As you might imagine, Esau was furious. In fact, Rebekah had to help Jacob run away so Esau wouldn't kill him. What's really crazy about this story is Jacob messed up big time, but he really did get God's blessing. Esau even forgave him later. We don't know why God let this happen, but the truth is we all mess up sometimes, and God still wants us to be part of his story. And that's the story of Jacob and Esau. So, in case you missed it, here's the quick version. Jacob and Esau were twins. They were different. Jacob tricked Esau. Esau sold his birthright for stew. Later, Esau wanted his blessing. Rebekah helped Jacob trick his dad Isaac. Jacob got Esau's blessing. Esau was furious. Jacob ran away, but God still blessed him. And that's a part of God's story.
All right, so what happened in that story? Who can recap for me? Who's the story about? Jacob and Esau, right. Now, who are Jacob and Esau? I don't know anything about Jacob and Esau. Who are they? Chastity. They're twins. Who's their dad? Shout it out. Isaac. Yes, and who's Isaac's dad again? Abraham. That's right. So Abraham, Isaac, then Jacob. Okay, I'm starting to get a family tree here. This starts to make sense. So Jacob and Esau are twin sons of Isaac and Rebekah. Now, are they very similar to each other? Are they like identical twins? Not really. How are they different? Let's go third row back here. Yeah. One of them was hairy. Which one was hairy? Do you remember? Esau, that's right. And Esau was covered in like lots of red hair. And what else did Esau like to do? Hunt. Yes, that's right. Now, did Jacob have a lot of really hairy arms and stuff? No. He did not. Did Jacob like to hunt? He did not. What was Jacob like?
Couch potato.
A couch potato. I don't know if that was quite the situation back then. I don't know if I'd call him a couch potato, but he certainly was not a super outdoorsman, was he? He was kind of more of a sneaky guy, right? He would kind of like be a conniving guy who would try to figure out how to get what he needed or what he wanted by trickery, right? So, what was the major problem here for Jacob? What did he need to get that he wanted so badly? Trinity? The birthright. Yeah, so what does that mean? Do you guys know what that meant in the story? Yes, back here. Yeah, so this was kind of a cultural piece where they would get a blessing if you were the oldest son in a family. It was this cultural piece where a family's oldest male child would kind of be the person in charge and get special blessings. That's just kind of how things worked back in Bible times in ancient Canaan, right? And so they were twins. Why was Esau considered the oldest? Did you catch that part of the story? He came out first, right? And Jacob was holding his heel, as the story goes. And so Esau was considered to be the oldest son, even though they were twins. And so Jacob was kind of jealous of that. And he was the one who wanted to get that blessing. He wanted to get that birthright that Esau got just because Esau came out first. And so how did he go about getting that? Back here. Yeah. He pretended to be Esau, right? First off, way back when, he had kind of gotten Esau's blessing in this by giving Esau some soup, right? Esau might not have been the smartest cracker around. But he gets the blessing from Esau to get the birthright, but then Esau decides he wants it later, and so he tricks his dad Isaac into giving it to him, right? He does that by pretending to be Esau. He has his mom make some food, or rather Rebekah decides to make some food for her husband Isaac, and Jacob disguises himself as Esau to trick Isaac into giving him the birthright blessing instead. Now, does it work? Yes, it does. How does Esau feel about that, even though he actually technically gave away the birthright before? Is he happy? No. In fact, the Bible says that Esau is so mad that he's trying to kill his brother. Is that what you're going to say, Chastity? Yeah, sorry, I jumped on that for you. Right, and so this kind of is a little bit of a dysfunctional family, isn't it? Not really all that happy of everything that's going on. There really aren't any real good characters in the story. Everybody's kind of being sneaky and taking advantage of other people. Jacob is being kind of tricksy and trying to fool his dad. His mom's doing the exact same thing and helping him. Esau doesn't actually appreciate what he has, and he's trying to murder his brother. The only one who really comes out of this without being too much of a real meanie head is Isaac. But Isaac can't really do much anyway because he's blind and dying at the time of the story. So it's kind of a downer as the story goes, isn't it? Well, how do you guys think this ends up? Do you think this is the end of the story for Jacob and Esau? It is not. In fact, we heard a little bit at the end of the video about how Jacob and Esau eventually reconcile, but any guesses how long it takes before they finally get back together and forgive each other? Let's go back here. 25 years. Oh, you are so close. 25 years is close. Right before that, it's actually a little before, it's before that. That's a little more of a depressing guess, but yes. Anything else? 20 years. Yes, it's 20 years. 20 years they go without having any contact with each other because Jacob is so afraid that Esau is going to kill him if he ever sees him. Have any of you guys ever had family feuds where certain members of your family don't talk to each other for a really long time? Yeah? I've had that happen too. When I was probably about 10 years old, there was a fight between my grandma and my aunt over something like somebody cooked something they didn't like the smell of or something. It was ridiculous. But because of this fight between my grandma and my aunt, I did not see my aunt or my uncle or my two cousins for 10 years. Right? These are the things that sometimes happen in families where this brokenness, this sin that kind of creeps into our lives can cause real problems for all of us. No one's really immune from that stuff, not even us. And these stories in the Bible tell us that that was true back then too. These families were certainly not perfect. But they did eventually reconcile. And actually in the Bible, there's an interesting story about what happens the night before Jacob and Esau get back together and reconcile. See, Jacob had been living out of the country for 20 years, and he finally decides, I got to go home. I miss my homeland. I miss the family that I knew and I grew up with. So he talks to his wife. He's married at that time, and they've got kids, and says, I need to go reconcile with my brother Esau. And he sends a message ahead of him to Esau saying, I'm going to come and talk to you. Let's get together as brothers. And he hears back from his messenger that Esau's coming, but he's bringing like 400 guys with him. So it sounds like Esau's ready to rumble, right? Like he's going to have a fight, maybe still try to kill Jacob. And so Jacob says, I'm going to go by myself. I'm not going to bring my family. I'm not going to bring my family and my friends, all those people. They're going to stay back. I'm going to go alone. And so he goes and prepares to meet with his brother Esau. And the night before, the Bible has this really weird story where it says that Jacob ends up encountering this man in the middle of the night who wrestles with him all night long until dawn. And eventually, when the sun is coming up, the man says, let me go because the sun's coming up. And Jacob says, not until you bless me. And the guy says, okay, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to give you a new name because you have striven with God. See, the guy that he's wrestling with was actually God. And he says, I'm going to give you a new name called Israel, and you will be blessed. And so then Jacob gets his hip knocked out of the socket, but the guy leaves, and Jacob goes limping to go meet his brother Esau. And they do reconcile, and they do make peace. But it's a really interesting story about how even the people that God chooses to use, maybe especially the people that God chooses to use as part of his story, as part of our story, are not perfect people either, right? Jacob, who becomes Israel, is someone who becomes the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. All the people in the later story, through Abraham, through Isaac, through Jacob, we get the whole line of those 12 tribes. Yeah, Ava. Yeah, so the country of Israel, yep, it actually connects to this because the country that exists today, called Israel, is named after the country of Israel that existed 2,000 years ago, which is named for this guy, because Israel had 12 sons. Each one becomes the leader of a tribe. And so we have the 12 tribes of Israel, which is where all of the people who call themselves Jews now derive their lineage from, back to Israel. So yes, it connects up with the name of the country, the same name. So I have a question then, which is, jump ahead here a little bit. Martin Luther's question, right? What does this mean? Why do you think this story, which is kind of a weird story if you take it all together with the whole pretending to be Esau and then wrestling with God and getting your hip knocked out of socket and getting a new name, why is the story of Jacob in the Bible? What's this meant to tell us? What do you think, Chastity? Why we should care for our siblings? Yeah, so they don't try to kill us. That's always a good lesson to take. I absolutely agree with that. Yeah, Bree. Teaches us how to forgive people? Right. Esau probably was still not too happy to have lost that blessing of both his father and from God, and yet he comes together after 20 years and says, I'm still your brother, and we can still do this. Yeah. You know why I think this story might be in the Bible? I think these are good reasons too, and there's no right answer for this, but why I think this story might be in the Bible is because it reminds us that even imperfect people are important people who are used by God to do important things. No one in this story that we hear today could be considered a perfect person, right? They're all flawed in some way, shape, or form. And yet God uses them, uses this broken family, this dysfunctional family that has all these problems to do some incredible things. In fact, it's through this family that eventually Jesus is born, the rescuer who comes to save all of us. And so maybe this story is meant to teach us that even when our families aren't perfect, when we're not perfect, when our relationships with each other aren't perfect, God can still use us to do pretty important things. Anyway, let's jump back to our memory verse for today. We're still in the book of Genesis, right? And Genesis means The beginning, right. Now this is God talking to Jacob, and he says, "Know that I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." So it's basically God saying, I am going to be with you, Jacob, through thick and thin, even though you're not perfect, even though you messed up, I'm going to keep my promises to you. And this will be important for our story next week as we talk a little bit about the next generation and about how they come back to a land that they were promised. This promise that God makes here is fulfilled in a later generation. So we got a couple vocab words tonight. We've talked a little bit about both of them. Birthright and Israel. So what is a birthright in the instance that we're talking about here? I mean, there's lots of definitions for it. But in this story, what do we think about when we're talking about a birthright? Let's go back row over here. Ownership of everything your family has. You become the leader of your family. Or you could say, in the definition that we're going to write down here, the inheritance of the firstborn son, right? In the context we're talking about, the birthright is that firstborn son inherits everything the family has, all the responsibility of leading the family, that kind of thing. And so Jacob and Esau are kind of feuding over this birthright. Now Israel, what's Israel in this context? Bree. The other one. Jacob, there you go. Yes, it's the new name that God gave to Jacob after he wrestled with him. And actually, it literally means the one who strives with God, the one who wrestles with God. And sometimes that makes sense for us too, right? Because I certainly have wrestled with God in a metaphorical sense. If we ever have questions or doubts or we struggle with something that's happened and we ask God, why is this happening? Well, we're kind of striving with God too, right? So in those times, we also could call ourselves Israel. It's also the name for the Jewish people, those 12 tribes of Israel that we got to. All right, so as you take some time to go into your small groups, you're going to dive a little bit more deeply into the story of Jacob and Esau, a little more deeply into the book of Genesis. This is the last week we're going to be in this book. Next week we're going into the next book of the Bible, but tonight we're sticking in Genesis with Jacob and Esau. So, let's see. I think everybody's got their sheets, everybody's got their folders, everybody got everything they need. Let's go with this section over here first. You guys can head out. And this section over here, you guys can head on out. And middle folks, you can head on out. I don't know. That's it. I had to save the best for last. Thank you, Bree. Have a good night, everybody. Remember to take all of your stuff with you. Remember to take all of your stuff with you.